Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Pan Future Society podcast. I am your host, Sean, as always, and not as always because I am not a time traveler. Today is Saturday, July 15th, 2017. One quick thing I want to mention off the top, I decided not to stick it in the news because you should already all know about this unless you've been living under a rock or in some sort of stasis field or something like that. Juno, the NASA Juno mission, has sent back more pictures, this time from a flight directly over the Great Red Spot of Jupiter. So there are some pictures, just the earliest images are out there now, and they will keep rolling out over the coming weeks. So if you have not seen them, go check them out. Just look up Juno or go to the show notes and click on the link there. It's really incredible stuff. So now, on with the news of the moment. First item this week, a new sort of material science and energy bit of news to follow up on my energy episodes a few weeks back. A company called Areva NP is testing out some new nuclear fuel assemblies. In a nutshell, among all the other factors in a nuclear system, the fuel, you don't just stick raw uranium into the thing, or plutonium. Uranium? Anyway, they have, you mix it with other stuff to make your fuel rods and whatnot, and they are testing these assemblies which feature chromium additions to the fuel pellets and chromium coating to the fuel rod cladding. I'm reading that right from the press release because I don't really understand all of that. I'll have to have Josh back on the show. We can talk about this again. The chromium-doped fuel pellets have a higher density and help reduce fission gas release in the event that the reactor loses cooling. So, long story short, among the many things you can do to make safer nuclear power, the way the fuel is made is a factor in that. And Josh and I actually didn't get into that. But here you have a fuel that will not heat and release as much gas should its cooling system fail. So there you go, a little news on the nuclear power front. And now, it came from outer space. Or it didn't come from outer space because its budget got cut. I was looking for space news this week, and this particular headline just caught my eye, and it's not really exactly space news, but Vice President Pence vows to return to the moon, boots on Mars, during his Kennedy Space Center visit. So American Vice President Mike Pence went to visit the Kennedy Space Center and speechified about returning to the moon and getting people to Mars, to which I say, wonderful, now it's time to put up or shut up. Money. It's about money. And every administration, every president kind of kicks NASA around like some sort of prize football. It's part of somehow become part of the tradition of presidential legacies to make mission statements for NASA. And I don't know why, because it would drive me nuts if every 4 to 8 years my job completely changed, or what I do got yanked out from under me and I had to start something completely different. And a lot of these space missions take decades to finalize and get up into space. And this topic is going to come up in the main segment as well, but NASA's budget is a bit under $20 billion a year. Trump's big, beautiful border wall, by many estimates, would cost $22 billion. The various groups have estimated the cost, and it ranges from 15 billion to 25 billion, around there. And I was looking for these numbers, and it was compared to an aircraft carrier. A U.S. aircraft carrier could cost $8 to $12 billion. In the United States, we spend an enormous portion of our budget on the military. And I won't make any arguments about whether it's necessary or unnecessary or anything like that. But it's a lot of money, and we should be directing that money elsewhere. I am sure that, many of the companies that make things for the military make things for space too. So it's not like it's a big stretch to do this. So, go to the moon, go to Mars, do the things in space. But yeah, put up or shut up. Put your money where your mouth is here. And that's what I'm going to say about that. Like I said, this topic will come up again in the main segment at some point, and we will just get on with that. So that is your news of the moment. Today's main segment bit is another one of my essay-type shows, this time in defense of science. I want to spend some time today considering ways us ordinary citizens might help science in the current political climate. And as I wrote this essay, I also wandered around on related topics such as the role good science and support for science play in sustaining civilization. And despite attempting not to, I will probably step on some toes. Here we go. Some loose thoughts to keep in mind as we go forward here. Science is not liberal or conservative. Science exists whether you believe or not. Consensus is as close to truth as we get when dealing with reality. Beware of cognitive bias and other logical fallacies. Science is the world. Cell phones don't come from the ground. Cars don't grow on trees. Science is the way forward. We can't go back to an agrarian society, not with as many people as we have. Science can help global warming and food supplies, save us from asteroids and from ourselves. I strongly believe, and this is a belief, I'll talk about judgment calls later, but I believe that we have gone too far to turn back, to go around, to go over, go under our problems. The way is through. It's not perfect right now, but to undo a century or two of scientific progress is not going to work. It seems preposterous that science needs defending, yet nonetheless it does. I am telling you this now mainly to remind you that you do not need to be a scientist or some person in power to do so. In fact, it's more important than ever that all of us regular everyday people who want to support the progress that we have achieved and who want to make sure we can survive in the long term stand up and be counted, be heard. I know it's not easy, and many days I just want to scream at people. It is a hard battle to tactfully tell your sister her organic water is BS, or tell your uncle the Illuminati don't run the world. Even harder still to be among strangers and casual acquaintances and to keep one's mouth shut, especially if the gathering is for something not exactly science-related. It's a fine line to walk, and I have often found myself tiptoeing around subjects and biting my tongue just so I don't rock the boat and potentially lose friends or clients in my work. But where you can, when you can, speak up and make a difference. I'll give you an example of such an event where, though I was screaming in my head, I managed to find just a small opening to drop some science without upsetting people, and just maybe they would go home and think about it. I was at a small gathering of self-employed people. It's nice to commiserate with people in the same boat as I am, and one very nice person there sold health and beauty products with dubious value. These products like to push the cancer chemicals in everything scare tactic, and I bit my tongue, played nice, and when the time came, I subtly made the point that the beer we were drinking was also a carcinogen, and there are many factors in cancer risk. And a few moments later, I was also able to reply to another person that people didn't get cancer a lot in the 19th century because they often didn't live long enough to get it. Nobody got angry, nobody got hurt, but I think I managed to make a minor argument for science, and maybe some of the others who were there will think twice about marketing tactics in the future. I'm not exactly sure how it happened, but we've stopped believing experts. Or, to look at it another way, we've anointed anyone who can access Twitter as an expert. Most people, I think, still hold some sort of admiration for Albert Einstein, Stephen Hawking, Marie Curie, other scientists of the past. But now scientists are often dismissed out of hand because everyone gets to play expert and believe whatever they feel is true. Related to this, and often more baffling, is when I hear people badmouth respected scientists and science communicators on various topics. Maybe Neil deGrasse Tyson isn't a farmer, but he certainly has the science cred to talk about GMOs. And for some reason, people seem to love to hate Bill Nye because he isn't a real scientist. So what? He's trying, and he's a good communicator. The hate I see is like some form of runaway nerd rage that you see directed at Marvel movies for changing some long-held comic book detail. And these attacks often seem to come from people who support science. I mean, aren't we all on the same side? We don't need a circular firing squad here. I see it a lot on articles also about futurism. Watch out for false dichotomy. We can go to Mars and solve world hunger at the same time. It doesn't have to be either or. And also, people who seem to support science can't stomach anything speculative, something that might never happen. Damn it, people, when did you lose the ability to dream? And this is the part where I step on people's toes, just so you're aware. It doesn't matter if you're wearing steel-toed boots, I will probably step on them. In cases of judgment calls, where there isn't necessarily a specific right or wrong, and there are those issues, and people who are strong supporters of science need to realize that not everything can be judged strictly on a scientific fact. For example, whether you like William Shakespeare or not, that's a judgment call. Whether you think we should spend more money on social services for people is a judgment call. Now, data and scientific fact can be brought into those arguments, but ultimately things like political decisions are often judgment calls. They're not necessarily black and white, right or wrong, the way some sort of scientific experiment could tell you this happened or that happened. This happens with religion. Religion is a judgment call. And it's not necessarily right or wrong. However, in our society, and I can only speak for the United States here, we do not understand the difference between judgment calls and factual calls. And in everything, we've decided to dismiss fact and not let it play a part we lock into our viewpoint and we won't change. And I direct this at people of conservative and liberal viewpoints, whether they be political or religious. If science does actually have a factual statement to make about something, you should listen. I'm trying not to just explode here. This is this is one of those places where I have to bite my tongue. I think it's okay to have a personal religious belief as long as it stays personal. Have a political belief, but understand that in the public space, the space where our lives overlap with each other, you can't blast through everything like a bulldozer. A compromise becomes necessary to function as a society, as a civilization. So, one thing I would like people to keep in mind, and this is sort of it's a philosophy that I've sort of codified into less words than it used to be. There's a very old saying about do what you will, but harm none. It goes back quite some time. And it's basically, that's a very simple statement, but it can really change the way the world works if you actually say, do what you want, as long as you're not hurting somebody. I add to that, my little tag on it, is to also, in any situation where your opinion, your feeling, your judgment is being faced by someone who has an opposite opinion or judgment call, stop and ask yourself, am I actually being harmed? Let that sink in. Think about that. Anytime you get that in the gut where you just want to lash out, take a breath and stop and say, am I being harmed? I say this to the conservative evangelical in Tennessee who hates gay marriage in California. Two men getting married in California, how does that actually hurt you? To the liberal mom who won't vaccinate her children and who goes online on Facebook and attacks other mothers for vaccinating their children. Really are, mom in California who doesn't vaccinate is mom in Wisconsin who does vaccinate actually hurting you. This is maybe just a plea for civility online. Just shut up. Sometimes that's, that can be a little more harsh than you want it to be, but sometimes we all should just shut up. And sometimes things that you do actually harm other people. And this is where we can bring science back into it. If you do not vaccinate, you might be harming other people because of herd immunity. Even if your kid doesn't get sick, your kid could carry the disease to other people who can't be vaccinated because they're too young or too old or have weakened immune systems. That's where science comes in. Science can step in along the way as we make these opinions and judgment calls and policy decisions that don't necessarily have a right or wrong. Science can step in and say, hey, actually, there is a right or wrong here. And this is why. This is what the data says. This is how reality actually works. And this is why we do things like vaccinate. So, that whole rambly bit, just do what you will. Don't hurt anybody. And pause for a moment and say, I'm about to explode with some rage-filled comment on Facebook. Am I actually being hurt by this other person? A slight return to a previous topic. what we can do on a day-to-day basis or on a semi-long-term basis if you want to put pressure on your elected officials. I would like to see much more research and development put into science and much less put into weapons. In the United States, we spend a huge part of our budget on the military, and there are needs for military, but what we spend on actual soldiers versus what we spend on wasteful projects that just line the pockets of defense contractors is insane. Put more money into science. It will actually work. This is a thing that you can actually throw money at and get something out of. Remember, we have this common phrase, moonshot. We say, to have a moonshot. Joe Biden recently, put forth a moonshot call for curing cancer. Let's focus and put all our effort behind this and do it. Well, that phrase has that meaning because we did that. We put an enormous amount of resources and effort behind going to the moon, and we did it. We can do it again. We can go back to the moon. We can go to Mars. It's not easy. Of course it's not easy, and it's expensive. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. And the benefits far outweigh the risk. And it's a far better use of our resources than finding better ways to kill each other. Coffee. All right. Moving on. Another place you can work at this issue is, and most likely on the more local level, is education. I mean, do you go to school board meetings? Do you know what goes on at those meetings? K through 12 education is where this all starts. I mean, it's great to go get a PhD from a university, but the anti-science and the ignorance of science that I see around seems to be like a failure of grade school level science. There are flat earthers, and recently they've been getting a lot of attention. There's one part of me that just thinks that's insane, and they're all just trolling us. There are people who, the things that people just don't know off the top of their head, it's astounding to me. And this problem has been going on long enough that now our elected officials are ignorant of science. Just very basic science things. There was a kerfuffle a while ago about a senator or a representative who was running at some sort of meeting and made comments about how wind power could suck up all the wind and the earth would get warmer because there wouldn't be enough wind. And this wasn't his personal belief. He actually got this from a crank's research about wind, which is also totally untrue. So he didn't come up with this idea himself, but the fact that he repeated it because somehow it made sense to him is just maddening. And this to me just feels like a failure of grade school science. It's like things that people say on the internet that are scientifically ignorant. I think like I learned that when I was 10. How is this a problem now? And this sense of education, this is, goes to the idea that, our world is built on things we don't really understand. So many people don't understand science at a fundamental level that it is dangerous to us to keep blundering around like we are. So, make sure your local schools are teaching good science and that the kids are getting enough science and getting critical thinking skills so they don't fall into pseudoscientific traps and can tell the difference, even just to tell the difference between Neil deGrasse Tyson saying something about science and Louis Gohmert saying something about science. Louis Gohmert's a senator and kind of a lump when it comes to science. There's a difference there. Because of their positions, Tyson and Gohmert are both experts in some way. Gohmert is an elected national official. That means something. But not everyone who gets on television knows what they're talking about. And we need to be able to tell the difference between that, just to be able to have the skills set in us at a very young age to take in information and slow down the flow of information and think about, where is this coming from? What does this actually mean? Is this as big or small as this person is telling me? Education really matters. And on the topic, just a quick thing here about contacting your elected officials, because that's the system we have. We can't directly change things. We sort of, this indirect democracy that we have, this republic. If you're contacting them, call or write. Your senators, your representatives, your mayors, your governors, your president. Calling and writing is much more effective than emailing, because email is easy. These people get hundreds and hundreds of emails a day, and their staffers sort through them, and most of them get a pleasant response, thanks for writing, blah, 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 and nothing happens. Calling or writing an actual letter is much more effective, much more likely to get your concern or your comments directly to the person you're trying to contact. So if you are going to contact your senators or whatnot, call or write an actual letter that you send in the mail. And just a little tag on that, signing petitions online, I guess don't not do it, but also keep in mind that often very little actually happens for doing that. If that's the only thing you do and you feel great and think everything's been taken care of, well, you're wrong. You need to do more than that. But I feel like I've been rambling on here and it's all bad news. It's not. Things are slowly still getting better. Things are better now than they were 100 years ago. Things are better now than they were 1,000 years ago. We're still moving forward. And as I've said before, I often, when I look at these futurism topics and I look at the technology that we're developing and where we are always at the beginning. You can look back and say, wow, look at how far we've come. But this is not the end of the process. This is still just the beginning. That future imagined by Arthur C. Clarke or Gene Roddenberry, we're at the very beginning of what needs to happen to make that future happen. In a way, it's frustrating and sort of makes me sad that I am just at the cusp of looking over that ridge into that future, but I probably won't live to see most of it. But I will do what I can to make sure that it happens, and I hope you do too. Well, thank you so much for joining me on this episode and sticking with me through all of that rambling and ranting and soapboxing and lecturing. Thank you. And as always, you can come to the website, panfuture.org. Send me an email, click on the donate link, find the links to YouTube and iTunes and Facebook and Twitter and all the things there. And send me an email, hit me up on Twitter, let me know what you think. Let me know what you've done to help science in your neighborhood. We need a new Mr. Rogers. That's what we need. Neil deGrasse Tyson should reboot Mr. Rogers. That would be awesome. Anyway, I've said it before and I'll say it again and I'll keep saying it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I will talk to you again in the future.